Meantime, President-elect Donald Trump was on a victory tour through Indiana today, showcasing his deal with Carrier Corp. The air conditioner company will keep more than 1,000 jobs in Indiana rather than migrating to Mexico. And in return, Indiana will give Carrier's parent company, United Technologies, $7 million in tax breaks over the next 10 years. Carrier itself will also invest another $16 million to keep operations in the state.
Here is what Trump said about that deal this afternoon.
I will tell you that United Technologies and Carrier stepped it up, and now they're keeping, actually, the numbers over 1,100 people, which is so great, Companies, when they say they're thinking about leaving this country, because they're not leaving this country. They're not going to leave this country, and the workers are going to keep their jobs. And they can leave from state to state, and they can negotiate good deals with the different states and all of that. But leaving the country is going to be very, very difficult.
Let's bring in Paul Bonicelli from the Acton Institute and Greg Ip, chief economics commentator at the Wall Street Journal. Greg, what was your reaction to hearing Donald Trump say it's going to be very difficult for companies to move jobs overseas? There will be consequences. They'll be taxed at the border.
I'm not really sure that that's probably a sustainable way to create good-paying jobs in this country. I mean, we get those kinds of jobs when workers and entrepreneurs figure out how to make great products at prices that people want to pay. If the only way to keep production in this country is to either threaten or bribe a company, as appears to have happened here, I'm not sure that's a sustainable model for keeping jobs here. I mean, the bottom line is Carrier wanted to move those jobs to Mexico because it's cheaper to make air conditioners there. If the end result of this is that more products are made at a higher cost in the United States, people who buy air conditioners or whatever product was going to be outsourced will be paying more. They're worse off. And in return for that, we get a smaller number of people because they get to get their jobs or higher wages who will be better off.
Paul, what do you think? I mean, I know you're in favor of this, but as Donald Trump threatens consequences to companies that take jobs overseas, if they keep them here, are there economic consequences, as Greg Ip suggests?
Well, I think that we're at risk of making a little too much of the president-elect making this phone call. This is, after all, the state of Indiana. This happens all the time. Governors, mayors, legislatures, city councils, they make special arrangements to keep jobs. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not new. So I don't think that's the main story here. The main story here is an economic plan from Mr. Trump that wants to cut regulation, cut taxes, and on top of that, so far he's putting together a reform cabinet. You know, economic growth comes from individual human beings who have talents and gifts and the ability to use those gifts and their labor. And with a secretary like Betsy DeVos, we can retool education, we can make our workers more productive, because at the end of the day, it is unleashing the economic potential of Americans that grows jobs. And I think that's what this administration is going to do.
I don't think it happens all the time that a president-elect intervenes in this kind of deal.
Your point is well taken, though, Paul. But in the near term, though, are there going to be companies that are going to be listening to what Donald Trump said today about consequences of migrating jobs overseas? And, you know, what do you think corporate America is going to do about that in the meantime here?
I think a couple of things. I think, first of all, this is a president-elect keeping his campaign promise. But I think, secondly, you're going to have two things happen. The president is going to focus mostly on, with Paul Ryan and his new Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary, and others, a much broader plan. But secondly, you are going to have companies that are going to take a notice of this. They're going to put greater pressure on their governors and their municipalities and say, look, we'd like to stay. We'd like to use the capital, the talent, the market, and everything here. But we can't remain on the number 11 position of the Economic Freedom Index. You know, over the last 10 years or so, we've been dropping. And we need to have an economy that puts us back up there, so there's no reason to even look to go anywhere else.
So, you know, Greg, as the president-elect focuses on really a relatively small section of the economy, the manufacturing economy of the United States, which has some export elements to it, it's become actually more attractive for companies to relocate to Mexico, right? The currency markets are making that so. You see the Mexican peso go down in value. So it seems pretty hard, I think, to have any kind of a strategy, even if it's a broader one, to try and defend that sector of our economy, is it not?
You know, you're absolutely right, Michael. And by the way, Donald Trump is not the first, head of state to try and save a manufacturing sector with phone calls and pressure and wheedling and carrots and sticks. This happens all the time in countries like Brazil and France. It happened all the time in Puerto Rico. And those countries continue to economically suffer and stagnate because the overall economic environment was terrible. Too much taxes, too much regulation, the currency was misvalued. I agree 100% with Paul that if the result of a Trump administration is a more sensible tax and regulatory system, that is all to the good, and we're going to get jobs that belong in this country. I just don't see these kinds of sort of deal making as a sustainable model. I mean, this country creates and loses 5 million jobs per month. In manufacturing, around 300,000 jobs per month. What is Mr. Trump's strategy? How is he going to find the time to cut 300 deals like this every single month? I think that energy is much better expended, as Paul was suggesting, on making the education, tax, and regulatory systems better.
But Greg, don't you think some of the offset's going to be the fact that he's going to lower corporate taxes to 15%? So I get that it's less expensive to have these people in Mexico, but at the same time, he's really making an effort to lower the corporate tax as a nice offset and a benefit. What do you think about that?
That will be, but the lower corporate tax is just going to basically make it cheaper to invest, but not necessarily to invest to make air conditioners, but to invest to do all sorts of things, to produce hospital products or health insurance or retail. It's not the job of the government or the corporate tax system to tell entrepreneurs what types of products to make. And as I think Michael is referring to, presidents have to look at the overall impact of the policies they pursue. The Mexican peso has fallen 11% since Donald Trump won that election because people are afraid of a trade war with Mexico, which is bad for Mexico's economy, and they're also anticipating a big deficit boost, which is going to drive up interest rates and the dollar. That 11% drop in the peso is going to do more to hurt the U.S. trade balance with Mexico than any number of these deals can possibly help.
All right. Good to see you both. Paul Bonicelli from Acton Institute, Greg Ip from the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.
Thanks for both joining us here.
Thank you.